where our former king, King Charles I, walked through on his death day to be beheaded on the streets of Whitehall, I decided to dress as a donkey. So earlier this week I got to go to the Banqueting house, which is part of the historic Royal Palaces group. They have other buildings you can visit in London, which include Kew Palace, which is inside Kew Gardens, and that's only open in the summer, but it's just gorgeous. It's my favourite, I think, of the Royal Palaces in a way, because it's like a big country cottage and it gives you half price entry into Kew Gardens as well, so you can really spend a whole day there. They also have the Tower of London, of course, Hampton Court Palace and Kensington Palace, which is inside the grounds of Kensington Gardens. And so I met my mum on Monday because it was the 11th of the 11th, and so at the 11th hour we went to the service at the Cenotaph. Which is the first time I've got to do that with my mum. I've been living in London for over a decade and I always make the effort to go to the Cenotaph. Then we went to Westminster Abbey afterwards. Not inside, the outside has a field of remembrance, which I think is on until the middle of November, I'm not quite sure. And the public have all been given crosses where they could write names on of the war dead, and each cross has a little poppy in the centre. So it's like a big field of wooden crosses, and they're sectioned off in little fences by rank and the different organisations that have provided the crosses. So ours was under the British Legion, which is who organises the poppy appeal in Britain. And we had my great uncle's cross, who was called Leslie Gregory, and he actually survived the Somme as an amputee. His mum, my great nan, went over to France on her own in the middle of the First World War to take him back home, which I think was incredibly brave of her, and just that's astounding to me to do that for your son. So yeah, he survived the First World War, and then he died in London in his own street because he got blitzed in the bombings of London. And so my mum had put him on a cross so that we could commemorate him at Westminster Abbey. We were there for ages trying to find the cross for thousands. We were given a plot number and that took us probably about 20 minutes just to find the right plot, because they're not in straight lines. There's like different areas around the grounds, so they don't seem to go in numerical order, which is a bit difficult. And all the crosses are about, like, I don't know, maybe 6 inches high. So I was actually on my knees on the ground with my magnifier on my phone looking at each cross, trying to find my great uncle's name. This is me standing at the plot we were told our cross was in a green vintage coat. And he was the only one not there, which was really sad. There was a few blank crosses, so I reckon maybe all the bad rain we've had all week has just washed his name off, and I just thought that's really sad because this was his home city and it's the city he got killed in, and he survived World War I, which is an epic feat, and he's got a blank cross. I kind of wanted to get a biro out and write one of the blank ones, but I think I probably would have got thrown out. But he's in there somewhere with them all, which is nice. Anyway, back to the Banqueting house. We have palace memberships that my dad gave us last Christmas, and that gets you into all of the historic royal palaces in London and Hillsborough Castle, which I think is in Ireland, for free for an entire year, as much as you like, which is why I practically live at Hampton Court now and pretend it's my home. The Banqueting house is the last part of the original palace of Whitehall. If you don't know London, Whitehall is the road the Cenotaph statue is on for the unknown soldier. It is where Downing Street's on. The Houses of Parliament are right down the end of it on Parliament Square, and Westminster Abbey and it's quite near to the Thames, and all that's left is the banqueting hall itself, which is upstairs. And I'm kind of doing this video because I wanted to give a perspective on it from my eyesight version of visiting the banqueting house. If you haven't seen any of my videos before, I am severely sight impaired, which is a bit of a confusing term because sometimes I can see well enough to thread a needle and other times I am totally blind. And I was going to do a video explaining how I see, but every time I think about doing it, it just seems so complicated to me to try and explain it because my eyes are always changing depending on the situation and the environment I'm in. I thought it'd just be easier to just in my videos say how I was seeing at that time and what I couldn't see and see in whatever place I'm talking about. It's just going to be a lot easier for me. I asked if I could have audio description, and I've never used audio description before, where you get the little like headphone things and you walk around museums, because I don't like losing what I naturally hear. I find it a distraction, and I'm like, I use my hearing more than my sight, so to then shove loads of information in my ears, I'm like, but I don't feel so safe. And also I thought you had to walk around things in order, so if you were at the wrong exhibit it would still be telling you the one that's down the hall somewhere, and I've never really understood how to get around that. But we took them anyway because we were like, yeah, okay, might as well. And I thought she was going to give me headphones. I thought you had headphones on all the time, and she just gave me this little box thing that I didn't understand. So I passed that on to my mum, when you can have the audio description. I'm fine being blind, thank you. And we headed off up the stairs. There's a really dark stairwell. There's no step-free access to the banqueting house itself because it's 500 years old and lifts weren't invented then. And it's quite grey dark stairs, but it's okay getting up. And when you come up, you turn a corner and go up some more stairs, and then it's the only doorway up the top that leads into this grand hall that's got amazingly tall windows and a balcony mezzanine running all around it. And the reason it is fabulous is because it has a Rubens painted ceiling that was in a room designed by Inigo Jones, who I'm going to steal a picture of from the internet to show you because I'm slightly in love with him. He's one of my historical, like, oh, I just love him. Look him up, he built a lot of stuff around historical London. So yeah, you stare up and there are these panels with gold frames. There's a large oval one in the middle, smaller oval ones and rectangle ones on the ceiling, and you're staring up at this gorgeous, overwhelming, very high up painting by Rubens, which is just like, wow. And of course, I couldn't make out a single thing on the ceiling other than lots of pretty colours and gold. But what is amazing is the lovely people at the historical royal palaces have put touchscreens around the room, so you can zoom in as close as seeing actually every single brush mark on the painting. So if you've still got remaining sight like me, but you just need everything a lot bigger, you can just study there as long as you like, and you can move around the screen and zoom in on each panel, and yeah, literally you can just pinch to zoom until you will see little scratches in the paint and the centre of cherub's eyeballs, and so that was really cool. The only problem is I was trying to use this, and every time I zoomed in on something it takes a little while for my brain to register what I'm looking at. So as I'd go and try and go, okay, that's that bit, my mum would suddenly go like that around the screen and whiz it around and make it upside down and put some other just big blob on the screen that I couldn't make out. And to me it started actually making me feel like I was travel sick because she wouldn't leave the thing alone, and I was like, stop touching, stop touching it. So she's just like messing up the whole experience for me basically, which was giving me the giggles. And then when we got in there, I was absolutely exhausted from getting up the stairs because I also have chronic fatigue and I'm rather overweight, and I didn't expect it to be so hot. And so we walked in and it was like a big silent room with this tour party at the end around a throne, all quite huddled and quiet. And I walked in and I had to walk straight back out again because I couldn't breathe. And I was just like, this is quite overwhelming and I need fresh air. And so I had to just loiter in the doorway for a while until I caught my breath, and then we went in. And because we didn't want to disturb the tour, and it is just one big room, we kind of like sat on one of the window seats for a bit trying to faff around with these audio description things, because they don't have headphones, so everyone else can hear it. So it's like a really silent room and everyone's trying to listen to the tour guide, and then you've got me going like, no exhibition found, no exhibition found, on this loudly shouting across the banqueting hall. And for some reason, I'm sorry banqueting hall staff, but I think we've broken your audio descriptions because they just completely kaputted in the end and didn't actually tell us anything. Just kept saying, when we press the number for each exhibit, this number can't be found, so we just sort of like turn the volume down, put them in our pockets. So after that, just getting the giggles like naughty school children that have been left behind on a school trip, my mum suddenly went, oh, they've got costumes over there. And I was like, oh my god. I'm a costume degree graduate, so you only have to say the word costume and I turn into a hyperactive 5-year-old. And so we went over and tried on all the children's costumes on our own while the room was full of this tour having a really serious talk on the history of Charles I and neoclassical historical seriousnesses, and we were just like, there's a Ruff! Oh my god, there's a Ruff! So in the site where our former king, King Charles I, walked through on his death day to be beheaded on the streets of Whitehall, I decided to dress as a donkey. I wanted to take this home. I think they should have a gift shop selling this donkey head. I have no idea what this donkey head has got to do with this building, its history, or King Charles I. But I was just like, oh my god, there's a donkey. And so we just looked around the banqueting hall at this fabulous ceiling and history, with me with a white cane, a period ruff and a donkey's head. You know, and then there was, beside the costumes, there was like this drawing competition thing that I guess was for children as well, and a big pot of crayons, and there was paper on the table, and the pages were like the scene of a stage, like a neoclassical theatre stage, and you had to draw characters in the middle, and it told you what characters to draw, and for some reason it said draw the ape man character, because along with a donkey on my head, that seemed to make sense about King Charles I's execution too. So my mum was like, oh, I'm going to draw an ape man. And so she's like a little kid drawing cartoons, and I'm like, you've got to put a ruff on it. And she was like, oh, I'm going to give it an axe. So she gave it a ruff and an axe and said that was King Charles I's executioner. And just as she'd finished drawing it, this rather serious lady on her own, who thought it was an actual genuine exhibition on her face, just hovered around us and came and looked and started admiring it. And we were just like, right, walk away, while still wearing the donkey's head and the ruff around my neck. It was so daft, but I'd say well worth going to. There's also an undercroft downstairs which I fell into and panicked because of 2 little steps, and when my cane finds a step that I didn't know was there, it feels exactly like when you're just about to fall asleep and you have that sensation that you're dropping off a curb. So I absolutely yelped and went into a huge hissy fit that I'm not going down there. And we left. But apparently the undercroft is where they used to have their parties, and there was a drinking den down there, and I could hear lots of people, and it was quite dark, so we bypassed that bit. So I'd like to go again when I'm a bit braver and maybe see what else is in there. But also they've got, if you don't want to creak your head up to the ceiling to look at the painting, they've got bean bags on the floor, like massive giant bean bags that you can lay flat on your back on and just lay there for ages staring up at the ceiling at lots of naked cherubs, Rubenesque people. It's quite overwhelming, and because the ceiling's so high up, when I laid on my back on the beanbag, it was like you got that kind of vertigo feeling, like, because the panels are on oval shapes as well, so it was almost like looking up at a big dome even though it's a flat ceiling. And if you don't want to lay on your back on the floor looking rather bizarre, like when we walked in and we were like, why are all these people laying on sacks? It's a bit bizarre. They've got mirrored desks along the middle as well, so you can look down on a mirror and you'll see it all in reverse, magnified, so that's quite cool as well. But what I noticed was I actually preferred looking at the real painting with rubbish eyesight than I did looking at it clearly on the touch screens. It was good to use the touch screens to know what was there. Like, that actually explained to me what the figures were doing and who they were, and because to look at it with my naked eyes, it's just a mass of flesh colours and green and sky colours. But as I sat there for a while looking at the real ceiling, I was still like, I'm looking at this fantastic ceiling that was painted hundreds of years ago, and it's lush colours and the gold is gorgeous, and it's far more overwhelming to me to see a real piece of art like that and a real masterpiece with terrible eyesight than it is to see it virtually very clearly. I don't know if that is logical or if that makes sense to people, but that was what I left with the most from the banqueting house, was like, I'm actually really appreciative that I've got to see this and lay there and stare up at the ceiling and imagine the parties that used to go on there and what the rest of the palace would have looked like before it was demolished and burnt down. So yeah, I recommend doing that. If you do visit and you are visually impaired, don't just do the, oh, I can see it on a screen, so now I can see what it is. I think you should still lay there and still with your blurry, strange eyesight. My eyes are full of glitter all the time. I have a condition where the gel in my eyes is crystallising. So every time light hits one of the crystals, I see millions and millions of dots of glitter. So I got a glittery Rubens ceiling of blurred, fleshy people. But it was just gorgeous. It was really nice. Also, we went to like a pub just a bit further along, and if you're gonna go to the banqueting house, definitely go a bit further up the road and go to a pub called the Red Lion, which was originally a 1400s tavern on that site, and it's been a pub ever since, and the present one I think is late 17th century. But if you want proper oldie worldy pubbiness, it's very small, it's dark, it's wooden, they do really good coffee, and then upstairs it's eating, and the stairs are a bit of a death trap, but I survived. And it was just like really cute little pub, really sort of like you've gone back in time. So thank you for watching me.